The Soft Serve Podcast.
Creamy, delicious ideas without the creepy truck.
No more creepy truck. Oh, baby. No creepy trucks. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Soft Serve Podcast. I am your host, Sawtooth Frank. And on the show this week, I'm going to be bringing you some bad high school writing. I was going through some papers, and I found a short story that I wrote in high school that got me into quite a bit of trouble with the powers that be, with the man, with the people. So I'm going to be reading that story for you on the podcast here in just a few minutes. And I'm going to, despite what I say every single week, try to keep the show short this week. Now, if I sound a little off, I'm still fucking around with my new mixer and trying to get everything dialed in correctly. Something doesn't sound quite right to me, so I'm monkeying around with everything. So, what's going on? What can I tell you about? Well, let's talk about a little bit of news. All right, there's no show news. Absolutely none. Zero. Zilch. I have nothing new to report about the show. Well, that's not entirely true. I think somebody approached Stomping Jen.
I don't want to be an immortal lobster.
About being on the podcast potentially as a guest host or something. Now, this is somebody I knew many years ago, and I haven't really been in touch with too much since, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, at least since the start of the pandemic. And I happened to be at a local microbrewery this weekend. And Stomping Jen said this individual approached her about potentially being on the podcast. So, yeah, we'll see what we can do with that. Now, let me see. Oh, weird. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just fucking around again with my settings. It's going to take me a while to get used to this. I apologize. So we'll see. I wrote this person a message, reached out to them, see if they're interested in doing something, coming on the podcast. I don't know what I'll do with a non-Stomping Jen guest host.
I don't want to be an immortal lobster.
So we'll have to wait and see. So stay tuned. We'll see what happens with that. Let's see. Life news. A little bit more life news, I think, to report than I do show news. So again, I'm recording this on Monday, August 17th. And so that's a Monday, right? Yeah, Monday, August 17th. So last Wednesday, Stomping Jen and I
don't want to be an immortal lobster.
We went to New York City to do a bunch of stuff. So we stayed in Manhattan, so right downtown, sort of near Times Square, a couple of blocks away. We stayed at this place called the Moxie Hotel. Very cool place. I want to give it one of these. Really enjoyed the Moxie. It is got a really cool decor. It's comfortable. And the shower was awesome. So for me, that's the sign of a good hotel, when it has a good shower. And I really enjoyed staying there. So why did we stay there? What were we going to New York City to do? It wasn't just to stay at the Moxie Hotel. That's not why we were staying there. I'm sorry, hold on. I got to check a setting. This is really bugging me. I don't know why. I sound like I'm in a fucking tin can. I can't put my hands on it. I can't figure it out. It's really bothering me. Let's see. Okay, I did that. Let's go back. Look at advanced. No, nothing going on in there. Alright, we'll go back. I don't think I have any effects on my voice. Let's see. Nope, nothing there. Alright, let's go back here. Nope. Nope, nothing like that either. So weird. So baffling to me. Let's check that. Nope, nothing there either. Oh, good Lord, have mercy on my soul. Okay. I guess that is how I wanted to have it. Presets. Put it here. How's that sound? Is that any better? No. Is that better? No. Maybe. All right, well, we'll go with this for the time being. Sorry if things are changing up and if I am sounding really scattered. You know, like you get used to listening to the way you sound after so many years, and you change a couple little things. It really throws you for a loop. So anyways, back to the question, why were we in New York City? Why were we there? What were we hoping to do? What were we hoping to accomplish? Well, first and foremost, we went to go see Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses, who were at the MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. So they were playing just over the river, I guess. Is that where that is from New York City? And it was a really good show. Really enjoyed Guns N' Roses. They were fantastic. I had seen some videos online leading up to going to the concert that had me a little bit worried. Like maybe Axl Rose, the lead singer, wasn't quite up to the task anymore. But I thought he sounded pretty good, especially when he dropped down to his tenor voice, like, ow, 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 sweet child of mine, why don't we go, why don't we go now, why don't we go, like that. His, like, deep voice sounded good. I think he struggles a little with his falsetto at times, and his voice kind of faded in and out here and there. I think maybe they have trouble miking somebody with that kind of range. I don't know. But generally speaking, I thought Axl did a really good job. So, and then there was Slash, the guitarist, you know, the guy who wears the top hat. He was absolutely fucking amazing. Like next level amazing. And he seemed kind of like dialed in and in a way I've never seen a guitarist in a concert before. It was almost like he wasn't there. He didn't really look at the crowd, didn't really interact with the other band members. He just was like in a zone. and sort of, you hear that term about the flow state where you're like so absorbed with what you're doing, you really have no clue what's going on around you. That's sort of how he seemed to me. Like he was in a total flow state. Let me move my mouth a little closer to the mic, see if that helps. So I'm glad I got to see Slash while they're still touring, because he was absolutely phenomenal. Loved Slash. Then the bassist is somebody who I really like too. This guy named Duff McKagan. I like to follow him on social media, like so Facebook, Instagram. He does these really nice little videos, like behind the scenes type of things. And he seems like a really good guy. Now, like many of the people in the band, he's talked about, his struggles with addiction in the past, drugs, alcohol, that sort of thing. And, I kind of just love seeing these guys and anybody really succeeding later in life. It gives you a good feeling. And they all seem like they're really having a good time. They're up there making tons of money, so why not? So that was the Guns N' Roses concert. So let me give one of these to the band. Now, I will mention, when I was at the Guns N' Roses concert with Stomping Jen...
I don't want to be an immortal lobster.
I went off to find her a drink. She wanted me to get her a non-alcoholic beer. So I'm wandering around the MetLife Arena venue looking for a drink for Stomping Jen. Then I hear somebody go, "Hey, hey you." And I turn around and there's a guy sitting there. He goes, "I'm sorry. I hope this doesn't sound super weird, but are you by any chance from Western Massachusetts?" And I said, "Why, yes, I am from Western Massachusetts." And then the gentleman says to me, "Do you go to the Cinemark Theater in Hadley, Massachusetts?" I said, "Yes, I go there all the time." And he says, "Well, I'm the manager of the Cinemark, and I recognize you and the woman you're with." And we had a good laugh, and we talked a little bit about how he follows Guns N' Roses around the country and sees them. So kind of like a deadhead. I don't know what the equivalent is for a Guns N' Roses fan, but that would be this guy. And so he was telling me that he sees Stomping Jen and I at the Cinemark Theater all the time. So, and then I shared with him, well, I love Cinemark. I own stock in Cinemark, and so I must support the movies. Very important to me, because I only invest in things I believe in. Movies, robot dogs, flea poison, and genetically engineered farm animals. Those are the only investments that I hold. So, okay, so that was the Guns N' Roses concert, and that was Wednesday night, and that didn't get over until like 11, and we didn't get back to the city until like 11:30. And we walked around a little bit, and then we went to bed. So the next day, on Thursday, we walked the High Line, right? So if you've ever been to New York City, you know what the High Line is. But if you haven't been to New York City, you may not know about the High Line. And the High Line is this sort of elevated metal walkway that I think used to be train tracks or something that they converted into, like this walking path with all of these plants and art pieces all along it. And so I think it's a couple miles long. I don't know if it's that terribly long, but we were able to walk along that Thursday morning, and we walked down to Chelsea Piers from the High Line. That's sort of where it ends, and had lunch in this giant indoor market called Chelsea Market. And it was a little too much for me, to be honest. There was a lot of people around. And I sort of, I won't say I had an anxiety attack, but I was starting to feel a little anxious. And so Stomping Jen found us a place to have lunch, this little Indian place in Chelsea Market. And so that was fun. We had lunch there. And then after that, we walked back, all the way back uptown. See, I'm beginning to talk like a New Yorker now. After spending 3 days in New York, I know the lingo. We walked from our location south to the north, meaning we traveled uptown, back to our hotel, back towards Times Square. And so when we got to our hotel, we took a nap, and then we woke up and it was time to see the Book of Mormon, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. Now, I knew nothing about the Book of Mormon going into it, except that it was written by the South Park guys. So, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. And that it involved Mormons in some way, who are the devotees of the church, the Mormon church, the Latter-day Saints. And so, if you're a fan of South Park, you'll know what I'm about to say is very true. That while South Park is often very irreverent and, likes to, poke fun at the establishment and can be very crude. Some would say unnecessarily so, can be obscene. I really appreciate the fact that often underneath that crude and obscene comedy is real, poignant social commentary. Right, and that was true for the Book of Mormon play. So Trey Parker and Matt Stone weren't just making fun of Mormons. There was a point to the play and the comedy, and I'm not sure if we need spoiler warnings at this point for a play that's been out like 10 years. But, the play, the Book of Mormon, it takes on ideas of colonialism, the absurdity of all religion, origin stories, female genital mutilation, abusive warlords and corrupt governments, right? So the play is aiming very high in terms of trying to deliver social commentary, while also being incredibly funny and moving. So, really great play. I'm so glad I saw it. Whoops. Wrong sound effect. Did not mean to hit the crickets. I was on a different page. Really great play. Glad I saw it. Okay. That was the Book of Mormon. So after the Book of Mormon, which also ended pretty late, we went back to our hotel, went back to bed. And so the next day, on Friday, which, I'll be honest with you, when we left to go to New York on Wednesday, I immediately began badgering Stomping Jen to see if we could change our train tickets and come back early on Friday. Because I'm not a big fan of traveling. I don't like being away from home so much anymore now that I'm older. And I just wanted, I don't know. But Stomping Jen, to her credit, didn't listen to my nonsense and said, we're going to do stuff, we're going to have fun. And so we did. So we went to this place called the Cloisters, which was built by one of those fucking, I think, 19th or early 20th century billionaire types. Like a Vanderbilt or something. Let me see. Let me Google this. Let me tell you who built the Cloisters. Who built the Cloisters in New York City? Let's see what it says. Rockefeller. Fucking Rockefeller built it, okay? So, Rockefeller was either a billionaire or is like the equivalent of a billionaire or a trillionaire in today's money. So this fucker built the Cloisters, which is basically like this medieval castle located in this park called Fort Tyrone, I believe. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And, the Cloisters for me has always been one of these aspirational destinations because it's a place that my grandmother Joyce, used to talk about all the time. Said she went to the Cloisters to look at the medieval art. So it was kind of a pilgrimage of sorts for me to go to the Cloisters. And so we did. And I walked around. I thought about my grandmother, that sort of thing. Right? So it was good to see things. And they had a bunch of these tapestries that Stomping Jen really likes, which are unicorn tapestries, that I think might have inspired the animated movie, The Last Unicorn. So, as part of going to the Cloisters, I got in free because I'm a veteran. So I show my ID, say, hey, I'm a veteran, and they give me free tickets. And the person at the ticket desk was like, oh, here are your tickets. Also, your tickets are good at the Met back down in Manhattan if you want to go there. So Stomping Jen and I were like, oh, okay, we'll go to the Met too. So we left the Cloisters, got on the train, which got off at Central Park. We walked through Central Park and went to the Met. Now, I got about 25, 30 minutes into the Met, and I was bored. I was done. I wanted to leave. It was too much museums. So There was one interesting exhibit at the Met, which was this fashion exhibit that was like different costumes and dresses that I think have made an appearance at the Met Gala. And they were sort of juxtaposed with pieces of art that might have inspired them, which I thought was really interesting. So, like they would have a dress that was made out of like all of this like tendrily red fabric that looked kind of like tendons and blood, and that would be next to a painting somebody did of the human body, right? So they had these these costumes next to the pieces of art that could have inspired them. I don't think the art specifically did inspire many of those costumes, but it was sort of an exercise in look. These outfits, these dresses, these are works of art too. Anyways, it was good. That was actually very interesting, and I'm glad I got to see it. I don't know what the name of that particular exhibit was, but at any rate, it was good. Also, I'm forgetting, on the day that we walked the High Line, so on Thursday, so we'll go back in time a little bit, we went to a different museum called the Whitney Museum, and that was down by Chelsea Market, and I got into that for free too. So that was good. Got in to see the Whitney Museum for free because I'm a veteran. So not much else to say about that particular museum. Again, I think that was also founded by somebody with that 19th or early 20th century, robber baron money. And I think the Whitney is somehow associated with a Vanderbilt. And it was the Cloisters that were the Rockefellers, if I'm remembering correctly. So, yeah, that's it. That was our New York trip. So we finished up at the Met on Friday. We took the train back. This time I think we had to go back downtown, maybe? I don't know. But back towards like Times Square, the Penn Station area. And we got on our train and we went northward, home. Homeward bound, I wish I was homeward bound. So, anyways, that was the great New York trip. And now you've heard all about it. And I'm sure you are much better off for it. So let's see, what else are we doing in the life news area? I think we're planning another trip soon. We're going to be going up to the White Mountains of New Hampshire. So we'll be doing that. And our daughter, Space Unicorn, is now back from her 8-week trip to camp. And so we are able now to take a family vacation together. So Space Unicorn, Ted, myself, and of course, Stomping Jen will all be going on vacation together.
I don't want to be an immortal lobster.
Okay. All right. And I'm sure I'll be updating you on the trip that we're going to take to the White Mountains after it's completed. All right. Let's get into our main show topic, right? I told you at the start of all of this that I was going to be reading you a short story I wrote in high school called Time. Now, this is coming about because I was rooting through my desk the other day, and I came across a box that was filled with papers. And I started sorting through those papers, and I realized some of them contained stories that I had written when I was in high school. Now, the reason I kept these, I believe, is because as I was going through them, I realized that these were the stories that got me into some trouble in high school. Yes, these stories that I found, many of them are quite violent and dark in their nature. Now, to bring you back in time to when I wrote these stories, I was, 15, 16 years old, somewhere around there. And I was a big fan of Stephen King. I idolized Stephen King. I wanted to be like Stephen King. At some point, I think around that age, I even said I was going to live in Maine, in the woods, and write stories. None of that came to pass, of course. I am here doing this podcast. I don't really write that much any longer. So, but at that time in my life, I really was an aspiring writer. And again, I'll talk more about the story after I read it. But before I do, I will say that, in this day and age, were a high school student to write a story like this and hand it in to their teacher, I do think there would be repercussions. I think the police would be called. I think the student would be expelled from school. So I'm saying all that by way of saying this is an incredibly, I think, violent and dark story in many respects. Now, I don't think it's I will just say I don't think it's particularly well written. So what I'm going to read to you is exactly as I wrote it when I was 16. Okay, so this is the writing of a 16-year-old. It is not the writing of a 52-year-old man. And I really resisted the temptation to fix it up or improve it. Because my intention in reading this to you is really to provide a time capsule of sorts, a look into, what I was like when I was 16. And I think that was valuable for me to do as well, right? Because how many of us really remember what we were like when you were 16? Or have, diaries writing around or fragments of writing that can connect us to the people we were all those years ago. I don't know. I guess maybe it's not as uncommon as maybe I'm thinking it could be. But, I don't have a lot of the writings that I produced from that time in my life lying around. And just a few scraps. So here we go. I'm going to read the story now. I've given you the disclaimers. Again, this doesn't represent my current thinking in any way about anything. Okay? I want to be really clear. I wouldn't do any of the stuff that I'm describing in this story that I wrote when I was 16. All right, without further ado, here we go. I'm going to read you my short story that I wrote when I was 16 years old, somewhere around, 1989 or 1990, somewhere in that time frame, okay? It's called Time. Here we go. The bell rang. I got up from my school desk. After putting my algebra book in my black nylon bag, I flung it onto my shoulder. I walked out of the classroom into the dimly lit hallway. I headed for my locker down the hall. Everybody around me had smiles on their faces. They were happy with their minuscule existences. But all that was about to change after I ate lunch. After all, a growing young man needs his energy to create large-scale destruction. I went to my locker and got my lunch money. $1.25 for food that's not fit to feed animals. That's what I call fucking ludicrous. But what the hell? This is going to be the last day the high school collects income from lunches or anything else. I ran down the steps that led to the first floor. The steps had little rubber mats on them for traction. The mats served a purpose, I guess. But when people walk down the steps, nobody gives a shit about the mats. I know that I don't. I jumped off the last step and hurried down another corridor so I didn't have to wait in line for lunch. My strong legs didn't fail for speed, and I was third or fourth in line. The lunch lady greeted me, and I in turn greeted her. I took the yellow tray that was on top of the serving counter. The harsh glare of the fluorescent lights made my lunch appear to glow. If I were to turn off the lights, I bet it would keep glowing. I had not realized I was daydreaming, and I was awakened by an angry person's shout. I turned around and said to him, "I'm going to remember your face when the time comes." He pushed me hard and said, "Fuck you, you goddamn weirdo." The lunch in my hand went flying loose and landed on this asshole's white flannel shirt. Just as he raised his fist to punch me, I took notice of the polo trademark on his shirt. I looked at his face. He was pissed off, to say the least. His brow was furrowed. His heavy breath came out of clenched teeth. His eyes sparkled with madness. All of this did not scare me in the least, for I knew my facial expression must have been 1,000,000 times worse. He grabbed my shirt collar with one hand. With the other hand, he made a fist the size of a sledgehammer. He punched me square between the eyes. I heard his voice screaming at me, "Asshole! It's your time now!" Just before I lost consciousness, I had one thought. When I wake up, it's going to be this guy's time. The lunch lady's time. The school's time. Everybody's time. I drifted into darkness. Floating in a dark void, thoughts started to flood my mind. Ever since I was a child, I've had this power. A power to lift objects by simply concentrating on them. At the age of 5, while in a fit of uncontrollable rage, I killed my mother. She tried to make me eat my broccoli. I would not stand for it. I had concentrated on the iron skillet which rested on the gas stove behind her. With my thoughts alone, I was able to levitate it and repeatedly strike her on the head with it. It was fun watching her swat at the pan as if it were a pesky bug. Oh, I am sure she would have liked to think it was a bug, because bugs cannot split open your head or crack open your skull so that your brains spill out onto the floor. To me, The blood on my face. I came spiraling back into a conscious state. Pain filled my head. Things seemed as though I was viewing them through a thick gray fog. I was aware of an adult standing over me. A teacher. I could not see out of my left eye. I assumed that it was swollen shut because it hurt like hell. The teacher had blood on his hands. My blood. They hurt me. Everyone has hurt me. Nobody is without guilt, and they're all gonna fucking pay for it. All of you assholes are gonna pay, I shouted. It was time. I started to make my way to the cafeteria. I knew there would be people in there, my enemies. The teacher who came to my aid grabbed me. You, young man, are going to the nurse. Now, on my feet, I looked over at the lunch counter, ignoring the teacher's demands. I saw it. A knife. Just what I was looking for. I willed the knife up into the air. It was floating motionless, 3 feet above the ground. Sunlight was flooding in through a window in the cafeteria kitchen. The blade of the knife was reflecting the sun's rays, making it shine. The teacher was standing in front of me, not aware of the knife that started to speed towards him. I willed the knife to go faster, and it picked up speed. In 2 seconds, the knife would reach his head. 2 seconds came and went. The knife buried itself up to the hilt in the back of his skull. The teacher screamed and his hands flew up to pull out the knife. My attention went somewhere else as blood jetted out of the back of his head. I walked into the cafeteria. Behind me, I heard the body thud to the ground. People were screaming. I loved it. I was in heaven. Walking past a window, I caught a glimpse of my face. My injuries were far worse than I had expected. My left eye was swollen. It looked like a plum. Seeing my lips were split open, only then did I recognize the coppery taste of blood that lingered in my mouth. Blood stained the bangs of my blonde hair, making it appear orange in some places. I really had taken a beating. But now I was going to do the beating. A crowd of people, approximately my age, 16, were walking about in the cafeteria amongst the confusion. They saw me and started screaming. I don't know why. I'm a nice guy. Bullshit. There were 2 vending machines against the west wall. The machines dispersed various canned beverages. I willed the machines to open. The cans inside were neatly stacked in vertical rows. I willed the cans to levitate, and they did so. After getting them to levitate, I propelled the cans with my invisible force. The cans, about 50 in all, took off with the velocity of bullets. They flew across the cafeteria. My fellow students continued their screaming. All 50 cans found targets. The cans were traveling so fast that impact to anything living would ensure death. One can hit a girl in the face and her head disappeared and exploded in a fine maroon mist. Left and right, people were dying. It was nice to know that I was the cause. Next, I lifted the can dispensers themselves and hurled them through the air with my power. The machines killed at least 20 people. That wasn't enough. I willed the cafeteria tables to fly through the air, killing more people. I used any object I could. I was running out of objects to throw with my mind when I had an idea. I found an exit and ran outside. I was going to bring the whole damned building down. And I did. I closed my eyes and collected all my power. I began thinking about the foundation of the school moving. I shot out my invisible power. The whole school started shifting on its foundation, making it crumble. I pictured the whole 2-story building collapsing. It did, just like when they implode buildings with dynamite. The sun beat down on my shoulders, and I ran from the collapsing building. I glanced over my shoulder. All I could see was falling concrete and dust. I continued to run, out of breath, toward my house. Police cars sped by me, heading for the destroyed school building. The students had their time. The teachers had their time. The school had its time. Now, it's my time. I throw myself in front of a speeding police car. I will know nothing but darkness. Forever. All right. That was my short story, Time. Written when I was 16 years old, I believe. Maybe 15. Oh boy. Reading that is sort of like an experience of cringe and like dread and feeling lucky. Lucky in the sense that, let me start with lucky. Lucky in the sense that I feel fortunate that when I was that age, I was able to use writing to express some of what I was feeling, towards the social environment I found myself in when I was 16. I think like most 16-year-olds who aren't the popular kids, I felt excluded in high school. I felt awkward. I felt gangly. I didn't think girls would like me. I didn't have a ton of friends. I had my little core group of friends, but I was subject to, my fair share of bullying by other kids. So, I feel fortunate that I had writing as an outlet to express some of those things. And also, I don't know what I said else I felt about it, but cringe. Yeah, I don't think the writing is great. It's filled with lots of mistakes that I wouldn't make now as a 52-year-old, obviously, and I could have fixed it up, right? I will say, thinking back to that time, I submitted that story, I think, as an assignment. And there are a few more that followed that maybe I'll read on a future episode of Bad High School Writing that ended up getting me pulled from school. So I think this was one of the first ones I submitted. And then there were some other ones that followed this that got me into even bigger trouble. And I'll I'll tell that story at a later time. But again, I just want to be really clear. I absolutely don't feel this way now about people. I could never imagine myself lashing out at people in a violent way. Obviously, the methods that the character in that story uses are fantastical and psionic in nature, right? I was most likely inspired by Stephen King's Carrie, is my guess. I probably had just finished reading that and was probably interested in sort of writing my own version of that, if I am recalling correctly. So, yeah, but again, it's in today's day and age where there are, I think, people who react very strongly to violent expressions of any kind. I just need to be very, very clear. That does not reflect in any way my current feelings towards people, and I would never act out in a violent way towards anybody. Reading that story is more just an exercise in sort of exploring, what it was like to be a teenager and sort of reconnecting with some of that. So anyways, I don't know, despite the content maybe, I hope you enjoyed hearing that. Again, like I said, I'm not particularly proud of it in terms of its writing, or it's not particularly imaginative or creative. But anyways, I think it is bad high school writing. All right. So there we have it. That was bad high school writing. So let's transition into the episode and talk about some of how we're entertaining ourselves.
Recorded in front of a live studio audience.
Oh yeah, baby, how are we entertaining ourselves? Yeah. All right, well, since I've been traveling like a traveler guy, to New York this past week, I haven't had a chance to do and see a lot of things. So, in terms of movies, but I did manage to sneak out on Saturday with Stomping Jen to see a movie called The End of Oak Street. And that movie, basically, the premise of that movie, and these are not spoilers, is that there's a family who somehow finds itself mysteriously transported back to, I guess, the Jurassic era, where there are a bunch of dinosaurs and shit, and they have to fight them. It's pretty awesome. So that was The End of Oak Street, and I really liked the movie. The dinosaur designs were really awesome. In recent years, I think, the last couple decades, they've pretty much agreed that dinosaurs, had feathers, were brightly colored, and acted very much probably like modern birds did, which are the descendants of dinosaurs. And I think they did a really great job depicting the dinosaurs sort of in this new way versus the older way. They're definitely more like birds than they are lizards. So that was cool. So anyways, not the greatest movie. It was no Spider-Man, Brand New Day. It was no Odyssey, which I did a whole podcast episode on. But it was good. It was enjoyable. So I highly recommend it. The End of Oak Street. Let's see. On TV, just finished House of the Dragon Season 3, which is the Game of Thrones prequel that focuses on the Targaryen family's struggles to hold on to power, right? In sort of the time period where they had a full force of dragons and began losing them. And it's sort of the story is of we find the Targaryens in seasons 1 and 2 of House of the Dragon sort of in full power, realizing their full potential as rulers. And then as the story progresses, they begin to diminish and fade and lose dragons. And it's a great story. If you like Game of Thrones and you haven't gotten into House of the Dragon, I highly recommend it. Now, there are a lot of folks out there who don't like House of the Dragon because they find it to be too departing from the source material, right? But that doesn't bother me. I'm very easily able to hold adapted material as being a completely separate thing from the source material and kind of enjoy them both. I really, really like having two different versions of it. It's like twice the goodness in my mind. Let's see, what else? We're still watching Silo, which I enjoy. I like that show. That's on Apple TV. House of the Dragon's on HBO. And started another show on Sunday night, a new one. It's set in the DC universe, and it focuses on the Green Lanterns. And the show, unsurprisingly, is called Lanterns. Now, I've only seen one episode, but I enjoyed it very much. So if you're kind of into, that fantasy and like space stuff, and if you like Green Lantern as a character, definitely watch this show. There's a lot of Green Lantern stuff in it. It would be for you. Let's see, what else? I'm still reading, let's change to books. I'm still reading Dungeon Crawler Carl. I'm still on the first book. I'm about 60% of the way through. I got derailed because I was listening to an audiobook, which I mentioned on a previous version of the podcast, a previous episode. I was listening to Biological War, a Scenario by the author Annie Jacobson. It was so good, but also so terrifying. I don't think I could have imagined anything worse than a nuclear war, but biological war is even fucking worse. Like, Annie Jacobson describes some of the bioweapons, some of the organisms that have been designed by scientists, and they're terrifying. Like, she talks about this one, somebody had designed and made plans to genetically engineer an airborne version of the rabies virus. So they crossed the rabies virus with something like a flu virus. And it's just fucking horrifying that people created these things. scientists have created versions of the plague, the pneumonic plague, which has a 100% case fatality rate. There are scientists who have manufactured versions of that virus to make it airborne, antibiotic resistance, and when you're first infected, it has a gene in it that releases endorphins in your body, so you feel good for like the first 24 hours when you're the most infectious, and so that it encourages you to socialize and go out and be with people and spread the virus more. And then there's a version of the virus that's been built that, once people start finding out they may have been infected with airborne plague, they start taking antibiotics. The virus itself, right, has been genetically modified so that if it encounters antibiotics, it has a gene in it that gets activated that causes encephalitis, which is swelling of the brain. So, and then it will kill people that way. So, and as well as killing them through the way that pneumonic plague typically kills people, which is by turning your lung tissue into bloody oatmeal that you cough up. Absolutely fucking horrifying. Absolutely fucking horrifying. So anyways, listening to that book, Biological War by Annie Jacobsen, derailed me from making progress on Dungeon Crawler Carl. So I'm back to it. I'm back to Dungeon Crawler Carl. I hope to finish that book. And I did buy the second one. So hopefully I'll get to that too. But I'm a very, very slow reader, so it may take me a while. All right, music. Not really listening to anything new. I'm sort of through my Cypress Hill phase. I got excited after the Cypress Hill concert, and so I was listening to a lot of Cypress Hill. But I'm not listening to so much of that anymore now. Yeah, that's about it, folks. That's about how I'm entertaining myself these days. And of course, I'm doing the podcast, right? Doing that too. So that entertains me. All right. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of the show. I said I wanted this to be half an hour, and of course, I got on here and I just went berserk. I talked too much, once again. But, you win, my dear listeners. You win when I talk too much. I lose, but you win. Okay? All right. So, listen. And do me a favor, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, Blue Sky. What else is there? I think those are the main ones. Send me feedback. Oh, Substack. We have a Substack. Maybe I'll post this bad story on Substack that I read to you. I might. You could send me feedback. Through social media. You can email me, softservepodcast@gmail.com. Send me a DM through social media. Our website, softservepodcast.com, has a contact form you could fill out to get in touch with me. So many ways. So many ways to get in touch. All right? And that'll be it until we meet again, until we do another show in 2 weeks. I don't know what the next episode's going to be. I never know until a couple days before I record. Maybe we'll have a guest host. I don't fucking know. Right? And that's half the fun of it, isn't it? That's why you listen. That's why we're here together. Because I'm so much fun. But look, let me be honest. I appreciate each and every one of you. We're a small community now. Okay. The large number of listeners I had before I went on break for 2 years have largely vanished. So if you're listening to this, you're part of a small but growing group where every week we're growing more and more. Okay? And you're part of that. So good to have you here. Good to be in community with you. And we'll see you again soon. Okay? All right, folks. You know the drill. You know what I'm about to say, which is, let's see. Bye now.
This world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate. Those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility. That all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the sources, scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made disappear from the earth. And that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love. I shall never cease to do what little I can to help the world advance along that road.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the podcast participants, and not to any participant's employer, organization, committee, or other group or individual. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only.